Welcome back to Mike Stryker. This is another episode brought to you by 99spark.com, discussion and empowerment for the socially aware. As I mentioned in the very first episode, we're going to be covering lots of different topics, some political, some not so much. This is going to be one of those times where we talk about something that's not so political. It's a huge passion of mine, and that passion would be the UFC. I'm not going to say that I'm passionate about the UFC particularly, but I'm very passionate about fighting, especially mixed martial arts fighting. I think that if you take any sport and take all of the water out of it, I think what you're left with at the core is two men competing against each other. I think that there's something very natural and very raw about fighting. And I think that as long as it's done in a relatively safe way, I think that it's something that all of us can benefit from. I think that practicing fighting um, helps you learn a lot about yourself. It certainly helped me learn a lot about myself. And so I have a lot of respect for the guys who step in the octagon. Um, some more than others. But at any rate, I am really excited to check out UFC 217 that's coming up really soon. Yeah, so if you follow UFC, I'm pretty sure that you are psyched for this event coming up, UFC 217. Lots of awesome fights on this card. I got to be honest with you, I don't follow the UFC as much as I used to. I think that in general, the cards are extremely watered down these days. Um, I'm not a huge fan of women fighting. I got to be honest with you. There are a few exceptions that I don't mind watching fight because I think that they fight like guys do. When I watch fighting, I want to see intensity. That's what I want to see. And unfortunately, with a lot of the women fighters, I just don't see that. However, that being said, this card, UFC 217, come up. One of my favorite female fighters is going to be fighting, and I can't wait to check that out. So let's check this out. I am going to pull up the card here, UFC 217, which is taking place Saturday, November 4th. Um, yeah, man, this card looks awesome. Let's start with the main card. And, I'm not going to talk about every single person on the card. It's not really, I'm not that much, I don't know everything about every single fighter. Again, I like to watch the big fights. I'm not really in it for, the fighters that are up and coming or, the mediocre fighters, that sort of thing. So I'm going to touch on the fights that are interesting to me. Um, so as I look at the live card here, I see um, Thompson versus Masvidal. Yeah, I got to be honest. I'm not too excited for this fight. Masvidal, great fighter. I think Thompson is a really good fighter. I think that he took unnecessary criticism after his losses to Woodley, who also is a great fighter. Um, I think that Thompson has a lot of potential. I think that Thompson probably beats Masvidal here. I think he's hungry after his losses. I think he's looking for some redemption, and I think that's going to happen. Um, Joanna versus Rose Namajunas. You notice I said Joanna because I'm not even going to try to say her last name. Um, I'm one of these people who thinks that Joanna is slightly overrated. I'm not going to say she's a bad fighter. She's obviously a very good fighter. Um, I want to see Rose take this. I want to see her take it. There's something about Joanna's personality that rubs me the wrong way. I don't know if I would call it arrogance necessarily. I might call it a slight. I mean, I guess you could say she's a bit pretentious. But I find something very natural about Rose. Um, she's like the girl next door. There's nothing pretentious about her. There's nothing arrogant about her. When she fights, she comes to fight. Um, I absolutely love watching her fight. And who's going to win this fight? I don't know. Who does my mind say is going to win this fight? I don't know. I think it might be 50-50. But who does my heart want to win this fight? Absolutely Rose. Um, Garbrandt versus Dillashaw. I got to be honest with you, I don't really follow either one of these guys too much. I know that there was supposed to be some huge controversy with Dillashaw and Garbrandt. I don't know how far back it goes. I don't know exactly what happened. I'm not too bothered either way by the outcome of this fight. They both seem like pretty exciting fighters. Um, I know that Dillashaw. Um, so we'll see what happens. The main event, yes, Michael Bisping versus George St Pierre. So why am I excited about this fight? Honestly, I'm excited about this fight for Michael Bisping. You can say what you want to about Michael Bisping. You can call him arrogant. You can say that he had a huge mouth in the early days, or whatever the case is. This guy comes to fight every single time he steps into the octagon. He brings it every single time, and I love that about him. I love that. I love that energy and that intensity about Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping is also a guy who everybody counted out when he fought Luke Rockhold. And I absolutely love that despite the fact that everyone counted him out, he still came in there and shut up all the haters. That was amazing to me. Michael Bisping is an example of what we can do when we put our minds to doing something. Regardless of what other people say you can do or you can't do, if you believe you can do it, then you can do it. Nobody gave Michael Bisping a chance in that fight. Nobody. If you remember that, everybody was saying Rockhold was going to roll right through Michael Bisping. Well, they're not talking as much anymore because Michael Bisping showed them differently. So, listen, I'm not saying he's the least arrogant guy ever. What I am going to say is that Michael Bisping comes to fight, and he brings intensity that you rarely see in the octagon. And I can say that Michael Bisping is he has been a motivating factor in my life. So I'd like to see him win. Another reason why I'd like to see Michael Bisping win is because, honestly, I can't really get into George St. Pierre and never have been able to. Um, Here's a guy who people consider one of the best fighters in the world. A guy who hadn't finished fights in I don't know how many years. Um, People compare his wins to fighters like Anderson Silva, Fedor, Emelianenko, John Jones. Um, I'm sorry, but you cannot compare a fight where somebody brings someone else to a decision to a fight where someone dominates someone so badly that they stop them from being able to continue in the fight. You can't weigh those fights equally, okay? The only people who are weighing those fights equally are Canadians, and I don't know who else. Maybe people close to the border, I'm not sure. The only people who are weighing those fights equally are basically Canadians, okay? So as far as I'm concerned, George St. Pierre has no business being mentioned in the best fighters in the world. Okay, the best fighters in the world finish fights. Okay, Anderson Silva finishes fights. John Jones finishes fights. Fedor finished fights. Okay, these guys are over the hill now. Of course, not doing as well as they used to do. But when those guys were in their prime, when they were monsters tearing through everybody, they finished fights. They didn't bring fighters to decisions time after time after time again. Furthermore, George St. Pierre is a fighter who normally fights at 170. Okay? Now, I don't know if a lot of you remember, but Anderson Silva fought at 185 when George was fighting at 170. Whenever anybody even brought up a possibility of George St. Pierre fighting Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre wanted nothing to do with that fight. He dodged that fight like the Dickens. Okay, he had excuse after excuse after excuse as to why he couldn't fight Anderson Silva and why he couldn't move up to 185 pounds. I think he mentioned something about the fact that he had to put the weight on and he had to be comfortable at the weight and this and that and just say, all kinds of ridiculous excuses. Now all of a sudden, Michael Bisping is the champ at 185. Now George can move up and fight at 185. All of a sudden now he feels comfortable doing that. Why is that? It's quite the coincidence that when George sees a champ that he perceives as weak, all of a sudden he's ready to step up and fight this guy. I don't really like fighters who pick and choose who they fight. I don't like fighters who are opportunists. Has Michael Bisping been a bit opportunistic lately? Yeah, you can say that he's been opportunistic with Yol after he won the belt. But before the belt, can you truly say that Michael Bisping was an opportunistic fighter? That guy fought everybody that they put in front of him. Okay? You got to respect that. Okay? Um, Michael Bisping, also one of the only fighters to never be on steroids. I don't care what you say about, people being caught, people not being caught. Nate Diaz said it best. All of them are on steroids. They're all on steroids. Okay? You know, I don't like throwing accusations around, okay? But do you truly think that George St Pierre is the one guy who wasn't taking any steroids? Yet he was beating all these other people who were taking steroids? Have you seen George St Pierre's physique when he was in his prime? And you're going to tell me the guy wasn't taking some type of banned substance? You do realize that there are steroids that can't be detected, correct? They're called designer steroids, and if you have the money, you can get them, and you literally can't detect them. So I don't buy the whole thing that George wasn't on steroids. I'm not saying he definitely was. What I'm saying is I don't buy that he wasn't. You can't sell that to me. You also can't sell the fact that a person who went for years without finishing a fighter is as good as other fighters who finished fighters every single time they stepped in the octagon and finished them in devastating fashion. So, yeah, I honestly want Michael Bisping to win this fight. I would love to see what you guys think about this. Please leave me comments, responses. Tell me who you want to win. I think it's going to be an awesome fight, and can't wait to see it. Thanks for tuning in to Mike Striker, guys, and I will see you next time.